Hello guys and welcome back to the workshop. If you follow me on Twitch, you already know that I've purchased a GDEMU recently so that I can do my Dreamcast marathon. Consider this video as sort of an overview and tips and tricks video on how you should be treating it and things you should know about it. Kind of like a video I wish I had when I bought it so that I could refer to it because it would have saved me a couple of days of headache. So first and foremost, this is a fairly common knowledge, but you have to have a VA1 model Dreamcast, meaning that the sticker on the bottom of the Dreamcast should say 1 in a circle. This model of Dreamcast is the most common, so you should be fine, but there are some VA0s and VA2s out there. Those are not compatible. VA0, it fits the model, but it uses high voltage. It uses 5 volts instead of 3.3 volts, so a specific chip just burns out on the GDEMU if you try to do that, so don't do it. So this is the Chinese GDMU clone from eBay, and this is essentially the cheapest auction, the cheapest listing I found, and I bought it. This one costs about 60 USD, I believe, $60. So it is significantly less than the original one, but there are some caveats. First of all, this is how it comes. It doesn't have any sort of mounting support, so you have to essentially just figure it out on your own. What you should try to do is make sure it has enough support on this side. I have like some of those tabs underneath, so it holds it up pretty well, and I've also got a bit of tape underneath, so I can just push it down and it won't, stress the connector, because the connector is over here, so it's very imbalanced. You have to do something about that if you want to be using the button on it, which is for either resetting it, which is, you really shouldn't be using it for that, or swapping discs in games that require it. So this is all it came with. I don't know if like maybe other sellers for slightly higher price will include more stuff with it, like perhaps a mounting bracket, like a mounting pole at least over there or something like that. But mine just came as it is, the panel and nothing else. So what else should you know about this? I'm using a 256 gigabyte memory card in it. You should be fine with that. Like the website mentions that you shouldn't be using SDXC cards, but it works just fine. This is not even a very expensive one. I believe it's silicone power, I believe. 256 gigabytes SD card. It should be class 10 though. That's something you really should be going for, at least class 10. But I have no issues loading games. Even when I fire up the system, it's pretty quick. One thing you really should know though is it has to be FAT32, and the problem with that is Windows does not let you format like anything bigger than 32 gigabytes to FAT32 by default, so you'll have to use an external program. I was messing around with that quite a while until someone told me that I should be using a specific program, and that works perfectly. So here's the program. It's Guiformat. You should definitely check that out. It lets you format your SD card to FAT32, no matter the size, and you can even set the cluster size. The cluster size should be as big as it gets. I could set it to 64 kilobytes, and that's the highest. You should really go for that for the fastest load times. Originally, I used a different program it didn't let me set the cluster size, so it was probably about 4,096 bytes. So it was really slow. It took about 3 minutes to boot up, and that was horrible. But once I changed it to 64 kilobytes cluster size, it was perfectly fine. But then again, that took a really long time to do. I say it as it's nothing, but I had to copy all the games off of it and then reformat it and start all over again. So it was a really tedious process. It probably took me about like 3 or 4 days to figure everything out about it. So that's why I'm making this video, so you don't have to spend all that time. So I turn the system on and then I'll just talk about it in greater detail, and also I'll talk about this setup in a bit. So Since this is a 256 gigabyte card, I knew I could basically get pretty close to putting all the games I ever want to play onto it. Not every game ever released for the system, but most of them. So to achieve this goal, I used a program that came in really handy to cutting down the file size. Pretty much the way GDI files work is that every single one of them is going to be 1.1 gigabyte. So that's the entire image. But a lot of the times the games don't fill up the entire disk. So they'll have a bunch of dummy files on there, just basically empty data. And this program, RebuildGDI, helps you alleviate that. It just deletes all the unnecessary files, or just cuts off the empty space essentially, and then creates a much smaller GDI file, GDI package rather, because it's an entire folder with different raw and such files. So I think one of the outstanding examples would be Crazy Taxi, because the game is only about 100 megabytes. So you're already winning basically a gigabyte just by doing that one game. So using this method, I was able to cut down this library of games to about around 200 gigabytes or so. So it fit easily on the 256 gigabyte SD card. Of course, I cut down a bunch of games I didn't want to play ever, but that's completely fine. I don't think you can fit the entire library on one of these cards. You probably need a 512 gigabyte one for that. I'm not sure if those work on this system, but 256 definitely works. And yeah, the menu loaded immediately. So this is a feature in GDEMENU. There's a program called GDE. I think it's called SD card, or GDMU SD or something like that. I'll link it in the description. So this program lets you copy all the image files over to your SD card. And by using the rebuilt image files, I was able to cut down a lot of space. But this is a double-edged sword, because it also caused a ton of headache. Namely, the fact that for some reason, some of the images, some of the games just do not like it when you cut down the unnecessary data. And about maybe 10 or 20% of them did not work. They just either did not even boot at all, or immediately crashed. This is mostly the Windows CE games. Windows CE games were the most likely to not work at all. So I had to painstakingly go through every single image and see if they are playable, and make a list of games I need to redo. I'll actually post the list of games I found to be problematic, and I'll post it in the description so you don't have to, go through each and every one of them. So it should be a lot easier for you to set it up. But yeah, for some reason, it plays around with the file structure in a way that it breaks some of the games. So for the most part, I would advise staying away from RebuildGDI, but then again, it's a really good tool to cut down the file size. So you really have to test around a little bit. But like I said, there's the list. You can look at it and then see which ones are affected and which ones are not. But I would say most of them are not affected. Most of them work just fine. So you should be fine. Another note is that you can use ZDI files, yes, but there's a problem with those, because they have been tinkered with. Not only sometimes they have removed video files or re-encoded them to lower quality, or audio is worse, but one of the main things about them is that they will be set to here's one actually. This is a CDI. The region will be set to free. And what that means is if you have a PAL system, the game will boot up in PAL, even though it's an NTSC game, and you really don't want that. If you have an NTSC system, it doesn't really affect you at all, but with the PAL system, even though this is a NTSC image, it will boot up the game in PAL. So you'll have a worse experience, or in case of a CRT TV, it might cause blindness, because we all know that PAL CRT experience isn't the best. So sorry, I just unplugged the charger. So yeah, definitely, as you can see, it's running at PAL, even though this is the Half-Life NTSC CDI file. Well, at least for Half-Life, there's a solution. You can just use the older one. There's an older build, which works just as well, and you don't have to worry about having it in PAL. I'm trying to reset with one hand. It's not very easy. Soft reset. So if you press the A, B, X, Y, and the start button at the same time, oh, this looks really yellow on the camera. If you press those at the same time, then you can quit back to the GDEMU menu, and the button does the same thing actually. But for multi-disc games, you can change that. But going back to the games, like I said, stick to GDIs because they will have the original region set, so you won't have this issue. So as you can see, this half-life is set to NTSC-U, so even though this is a PAL system, it will boot the game in NTSC. Another thing I wanted to mention is that for some reason, some of the games have extra sort of region protection built in, I suppose. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but there are some games that will not work if you use the NTSC build on the PAL system. One of these games just so happens to be Shadow Man. So if I can find Shadow Man, and so this is the NTSC version of Shadow Man, as you can see. If I try to run it, you can see it's a PAL system. There's a blue swirl, and I've got a working image file on it. The same thing happens on if you use a Dream Shell as well. It just resets the system. It will refuse to boot. But if I try to use a PAL image file, it will actually work just fine. So it's very interesting. I don't know why that is, but it seems like there might be some extra region protection. As you can see, I added it to the end of it so that the image doesn't get fragmented. It's another thing you should pretty much look out for. I feel like if your image file will be fragmented, as in you've deleted the previous file and then you added a new one, it will fill in the empty space and it could become fragmented if it's bigger than the empty space. So that could cause some slowdowns essentially. As you can see, it works just fine. So yeah, going back to the soft reset. So if it's enabled, you have to press A, B, X, Y and start at the same time. And then all the games pretty much have this feature as well. But you can just, if you press it enough times, it will reset the system. Now, at first I was confused when I tried to play D2 because it also just reset the system when I pressed the button on the device. What you have to do for it is you have to go into the options by pressing X. Go into the options and just simply disable in-game reset. What it does is it will enable swapping disks. And I will demonstrate it for you here real quick. So when you try to play D2, this game does not let you save before you swap disks, so you'll have to use the button. There's no other way to get to the next disk. I've recently played through it without any issues, so it is confirmed working on a Chinese GDMU. So first of all, the first issue you'll see is that if you try to look at the opening video, it'll prompt you to insert the fourth disk, which is a very interesting method of doing it, but I can demonstrate it to you here. This is essentially 100% compatible with every game because it is a GDEMU. It's an optical drive replacement, so it does not rely on any different method of inputting data into the system than the optical drive's connection. So please insert disk 4. Let me try this again. So 1, 2, 3. Huh. Okay, I don't know why it's not working right now. That's interesting. It was working before. Maybe I have to save it. I feel like I think it's that I have to actually save the option. That must be it. See, I still don't know the system 100%, but I'm learning. So in the meantime, I guess I'll talk about the fan situation and why I have it this way. So the fan is simply there because I felt like it was getting a bit too hot to the touch. Like it was just getting uncomfortably hot. So I decided to put the fan on. This Dreamcast has a broken top shell, so that's why I didn't bother putting it back on. But since I'm using it open air, I thought it would be cool enough, but no, it did need an extra fan. Um, so yeah. But if you close it down, it might cool down enough. Not exactly sure. Also, the fan serves another purpose as well. I'll talk about it in a bit. So let me try this one more time. Going to options. Let's save the settings because I don't think it's saved it. That might be the issue. We'll see. So what you have to know about the GDEMU is it doesn't use 12 volts at all, I believe. So what you have to consider is that the 12-volt line on the power supply is essentially going unused, and the voltages can rise to up to even over 40 volt, even up to 14 volts. So that could be introducing a lot of heat to the system, and you don't want it to be overheating. Some people remove the 12-volt rail entirely by removing this MOSFET, but I don't recommend that. I feel like it's kind of a barbaric solution. What I like to do is just use one of these resistors. It's a 300 ohm resistor. You basically jam it in between the 12 volt positive and then a ground. It doesn't matter which ground. You just jam it in between 12 volts. It's a 300 ohm. I think this is rated at 0.6 watts. So you don't need like high wattage one at all. And just jam it in there. Now, I could also just use a fan because that's also using power and it keeps the 12-volt rail busy. So that's actually why I have it jammed in there. It's kind of a dodgy, temporary setup, but whatever, it works for now. I don't really mind. It's not even, getting out of there. It's not loose or anything like that. So definitely take care of the 12-volt rail. You don't want this system to be overheating. That would be not nice. All right, guys, I think I figured it out. What I was doing wrong in this case is that I was pressing the button way too slowly. So to be able to watch the intro video, you have to be pressing the buttons fairly quickly. I have to press the switch disk button fairly quickly. So I even tried these settings, but I don't think those changed anything. We'll see though. So this is much easier to do later on because then you just have to swap, from disk 2 to 3, but I can't show you that right now. I might have a save potentially. Actually, no, I don't have any saves that wants you to do that. But it's much easier to do when it just asks you to insert the next disk. It's a bit more tricky if it's asking you to insert the fourth disk from the first disk, but it's still doable. So, all right, I was just being a bit of a Dumbo. So this is what you do. So I can finally showcase it. You go into opening movie, and then just press it quickly. I was pressing it way too slowly. Just press it quickly. 3 times. There you go. That's what you have to do. The problem was I pressed it slowly, and then it loaded the second disc, and then loaded the third disc, and then that was too slow, and the game just gave up and didn't care about the fourth disc anymore. So at that point, you could only reset the system. So there you go. That's how you swap discs. D2 this is the only way to play D2 to be able to swap discs while the game is running. Other games, most of the games let you save before swapping discs, but definitely needed for D2. And, it saves you the headache of having 4 different discs or even more. Wink, wink. That is pretty much all I wanted to say about the system. Definitely use the SD card builder. It's a very useful program. Make sure to tick menu if you don't want to wait a really long time, because if you tick menu, it will create the first image as the GD menu, and that will make it so that you don't have to wait an eternity until it loads all the hundreds of images you have on there on your 256 gigabyte card. So definitely a worthwhile program to use. And if you're just as big of a fan as this guy right here, just as big of a Dreamcast fan, then definitely get the GDEMU. It's an awesome product. It makes life much easier. Especially for me, it was a huge help with the Dreamcast Marathon. So yeah, go check it out, guys. Even the Chinese ones are just they work perfectly. Other than, like I said before, not having proper mounting setup, it's pretty decent. So I would definitely give it a shot. So yeah, thank you for watching. Bye bye.